The Grand Hyatt Seoul shimmered, like a jewel suspended above the city's heartbeat. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across 800 guests dressed in silk and secrets. Korea's wealthiest families gathered beneath vaulted ceilings for the annual Untold charity gala, a night where fortunes were pledged and alliances were forged between champagne toasts. Kang Tae-hyun entered through the eastern corridor. His navy brioni suit cut a silhouette, so sharp it seemed to carve silence into the air around him. On his arm walked Yoon Seo-yeon, his fiancée of 7 months, beautiful, poised, the daughter of a shipping conglomerate. Together, they were the portrait of Korean power. He believed his past had been buried, sealed, forgotten. Then he saw her. Across the ballroom, framed by the soft amber glow of a pillar light, stood a woman he had not seen in 5 years. Her dark skin radiated warmth against a floor-length ivory gown embroidered with golden adinkra symbols. Her locks were gathered in an elegant updo, threaded with thin gold wire. She stood with the quiet confidence of a woman who had walked through fire and emerged not burned, but refined. Amara Mensah, his ex-wife. She was not alone. Beside her walked an elderly Korean woman in a midnight blue hanbok, her silver hair swept into a flawless chignon. The woman moved through the crowd with the gravity of someone who did not need to announce her importance. Everyone already knew. Lady Kang Hye-rin, his mother. Tae-hyun's fingers tightened around the stem of a champagne glass. Lady Kang did not look at her son. She did not acknowledge the heads bowing in her direction. She walked past the Minister of Culture, past the chairman of Hyundai Development, past her own nephew. She stopped directly in front of Amara, and then slowly, deliberately, with the weight of a decision she had carried for 5 years, she reached up, cupped Amara's face with both hands, and pulled her into an embrace. The ballroom held its breath. Lady Kang's voice was not loud. It did not need to be. In the silence of 800 frozen guests, every syllable carried like a bell struck in an empty cathedral. My daughter. The champagne glass in Tae-hyun's hand cracked. A thin line of blood appeared across his palm, right through the center of the small Korean-African unity tattoo inked into the skin between his thumb and forefinger. He did not feel it. He could not feel anything except the floor dissolving beneath his feet. Please like, share, and subscribe. The blood pooled slowly in Kang Tae-hyun's cupped palm. A waiter appeared instantly with a linen napkin, but Tae-hyun did not move. His gaze remained locked across the ballroom where his mother, the woman who had not returned his calls in 3 months, held Amara Mensah as though she were the only person in the room worth holding. Tae-hyun. Seo-yeon's voice was measured, careful. She had been trained since childhood to manage public appearances, and she recognized the danger of this moment before anyone else in the room could name it. Your hand. He accepted the napkin without looking at her. Did you know? He asked quietly. Seo-yeon's expression flickered, confusion, then alarm. Know what? That she would be here. I didn't even know she was in Korea. Across the ballroom, Lady Kang released Amara from the embrace, but kept both hands on her shoulders, studying her face with an expression Tae-hyun had never seen his mother wear. It was something beyond affection. It was relief. The kind of relief that follows years of silent worry. You look well, Lady Kang said softly, her Korean precise and warm. You look strong. Amara's smile was gentle but guarded. You taught me how to be, Yamianim. The word landed like a stone in still water. Yamianim, mother-in-law. A title Amara had lost the legal right to use 5 years ago. And yet Lady Kang did not correct her. She simply nodded, as though the word had never stopped belonging to Amara in the first place. Come, Lady Kang said, threading her arm through Amara's. There are people I want you to meet. They moved through the gala together, and the crowd parted, not out of courtesy, out of bewilderment. Every socialite, every businessman, every whisper network in that ballroom was recalibrating. Lady Kang Hye-rin, the widow of the legendary Kang Doo-won, the iron matriarch of one of Korea's most powerful families, was publicly presenting the foreign woman her son had divorced in disgrace, and she was doing it with pride. Tae-hyun watched them disappear into the crowd. Then he turned and walked toward the terrace. Seo-yeon hesitated. She had learned, in 7 months of engagement, that when Tae-hyun moved away from a crowd, you did not follow. You waited. You let the silence do its work. But tonight, something told her the silence would not work in her favor. She followed anyway. The terrace overlooked the Han River, its surface catching the city lights like scattered diamonds. Taehyun stood at the railing, the bloodied napkin still pressed against his palm. The February wind cut through his suit, but he did not seem to notice. "Tell me what's happening," Seo-yeon said from the doorway. "I don't know." "That woman, your ex-wife. Why is your mother?" I said I don't know. His voice did not rise. It dropped, and the drop was far more frightening than any shout could have been. Seo-yeon pressed her lips together and retreated one step. "Should I call Secretary Yoon?" "No." "Should I? Go back inside. Smile. Tell anyone who asks that my mother is reconnecting with an old family friend. Nothing more." "Is that what she is? An old family friend?" Taehyun finally turned. The terrace light caught the edge of his jaw, the controlled stillness of his features. But his eyes, those were not still. Something behind them was moving. Something old and heavy and dangerous. "She was my wife, Seo-yeon, and I destroyed her. In front of this exact circle of people." He looked back at the river. "Now my mother is standing in the same room, calling her daughter, and I need to understand why before I can answer any of your questions." Seo-yeon stared at his back for a long moment. Then she turned and walked inside, her heels clicking against the marble with the precision of a metronome counting down. 5 years ago, Amara Mensah had stood in this same hotel. Different ballroom. Same faces. Same crystal. Same careful cruelty dressed in evening wear. She had been 25 years old. A Ghanaian linguistics graduate who had come to Seoul on an academic fellowship, fallen impossibly in love with a man whose world she barely understood, and married him in a ceremony that merged Korean tradition with the Shanti royalty customs. For 2 years, she had tried to learn the architecture of the Kong family, its codes, its silences, its unspoken wars. She had failed, not because she lacked intelligence or grace, but because the architecture had been designed to crush anyone who did not already belong. The divorce had been announced at a press conference, not privately, not with dignity. Kang Tae-hyun had stood behind a podium in the Kang Corporation headquarters, flanked by attorneys, and delivered a statement that was clinical in its precision and devastating in its implications. "The Kang family regrets to announce the dissolution of my marriage to Amara Mensah. This decision was made after careful review of conduct incompatible with the values and expectations of our family. We wish her well in her future endeavors." Conduct incompatible. The phrase had been engineered to suggest betrayal without specifying it. The media had filled in the blanks with speculation. Infidelity, financial impropriety, cultural incompatibility. Every tabloid had a different theory, and each one painted Amara as the outsider who had overreached. She had not been allowed to speak. Her belongings had been packed and delivered to a hotel. Her visa sponsorship, tied to the Khan Corporation, had been revoked within 72 hours. She had been given a settlement check and a one-way ticket to Accra. She had taken neither. Instead, she had disappeared into Seoul's margins. A tiny officedel in Mullidong, a part-time translation job at a legal firm, rice and kimchi for dinner, pride and fury for breakfast, and slowly, painstakingly, she had rebuilt. The African Cultural Heritage Foundation had started as a blog, then a small gallery exhibition in Itaewon, then a partnership with the National Museum of Korea, then a grant from the Korea Foundation, then another, then a collaboration with the Smithsonian, then UNESCO recognition. By the time the world noticed Amara Mensah again, she was no longer the disgraced ex-wife of a Korean magnate. She was the founder of one of Asia's most celebrated cultural bridges between the African continent and East Asia. Her foundation had funded scholarships for 47 Korean students studying in Ghana, Nigeria, and South Africa. It had brought traditional weavers to exhibit alongside Korean pojagi artists. It had created language exchange programs, art residencies, and a documentary series that had won 3 international awards. She had done all of this without ever speaking Taehyun's name publicly. Not once. And that silence, that deliberate, dignified silence, had been louder than any accusation she could have made. Now she stood in the Grand Hyatt once more, Lady Kang's arm linked through hers, and she could feel the room watching. She had prepared for this moment for weeks, ever since Lady Kong had contacted her through a private intermediary and asked, not demanded, asked, if Amara would accompany her tonight. "I know what I am asking," Lady Kong had said during their private meeting at the Kong countryside villa 3 weeks earlier. The old woman had sat in a wooden chair by the window, afternoon light, catching the silver in her hair. "I am asking you to walk back into the room that tried to erase you." "Why?" Amara had asked simply. "Because it is time for the truth, and the truth requires witnesses." Amara had studied Lady Kang's face, the deep lines around her eyes, the controlled set of her mouth, the way her hands rested in her lap, with a stillness that suggested enormous restraint. She had always respected this woman, even during the worst of it, even when she had believed Lady Kong had supported the divorce. What truth, him? Lady Kong had looked at her for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of something she had been holding alone for 5 years. "The truth about why I destroyed your marriage to save your life." The gala continued around them like a river flowing past a stone. Amara smiled when introduced. She spoke Korean flawlessly, better, some noted, than she had 5 years ago. She discussed her foundation's upcoming exhibition with genuine passion, her hands moving gracefully as she described the collaboration between Ghanaian Kent weavers and Korean silk artisans. But beneath the composure, her heart was hammering. She had seen him. The moment she entered the ballroom, her body had known before her eyes confirmed it. Something in the air had shifted, a frequency only she could detect, tuned to a signal she had spent 5 years trying to forget. Kang Tae-hyun. He looked the same and entirely different. The sharp jawline, the piercing eyes that could hold a room hostage without blinking. The way he stood, perfectly still, perfectly centered, as though the world orbited around him and not the other way around. But there were new shadows beneath his cheekbones, a tension in his shoulders that had not been there before. And when their eyes had met, for exactly 2 seconds before she forced herself to look away, she had seen something she did not expect. Pain, not anger, not contempt, not the cold authority he had worn like armor during the divorce. Pain, raw, barely concealed. The kind of pain that lives in the body long after the mind has tried to file it away. She had looked away because looking longer would have been dangerous. Not for him, for her. "Mrs. Park would like to discuss a donation," Lady Kong murmured, steering her toward a cluster of women in elaborate handbox. "She controls the Sejong Cultural Fund. Be warm but specific. She respects precision." Amara almost smiled. Lady Kong was coaching her, the way a mother coaches a daughter before a debut. The irony was not lost on either of them. "Iamianum," Amara whispered. "He's watching." "I know," Lady Kong replied without turning. "Let him watch. Let him wonder. The wondering is part of the medicine." Tae-hyun did not return to the ballroom for 20 minutes. When he did, the napkin was gone, replaced by a thin bandage hidden beneath his shirt cuff. He moved through the crowd with his usual commanding ease, accepting greetings, exchanging measured pleasantries. But his lieutenants, the men who knew him beyond the public mask, noticed the difference. Park Jun-ho, his chief of security and oldest friend, appeared at his elbow with a fresh glass of sparkling water. "So," Jun-ho said mildly, "she's back." "You knew." "I knew she was in Seoul. I've known for about 2 years. She's been remarkably careful about staying off our radar. Or rather," he paused, choosing his words, "she hasn't been hiding. She simply hasn't been living in our world." "And my mother?" Jun-ho hesitated. "Your mother's movements in the last 3 months have been unusual. Private meetings, visits to locations outside our normal monitoring. I flagged it, but you told me. I told you my mother's privacy was not to be violated." Tae-hyun's jaw tightened. "I remember. She used that privacy well." Tae-hyun watched across the room as his mother introduced Amara to Chairman Lim of the Korean National Arts Council. Amara bowed with perfect form, 30 degrees, hands clasped, 3 seconds of held contact before rising. It was flawless, respectful without being subservient, confident without being presumptuous. She had always been a fast learner, but this was something beyond learning. This was mastery. "Find out everything." Taehyun said quietly. The foundation. Her connections. How long my mother has been in contact with her. Everything. And Seo-yeon. Taehyun's expression did not change. What about her? Junho studied his friend's profile. In 20 years of service, he had seen Taehyun negotiate with arms dealers, stare down rival syndicate leaders, and walk through situations that would have broken lesser men. He had never seen him look the way he looked right now. Haunted. Nothing, Junho said. I'll have a report by morning. The gala ended at midnight. Guests filtered out in waves of silk and self-importance, their cars arriving in choreographed precision. Taehyun escorted Seo-yeon to their car, without a word. She sat beside him in the back seat of the Rolls-Royce Phantom, the city lights sliding across her face, and said nothing for 7 full minutes. Then, she's beautiful. Taehyun did not respond. More beautiful than I expected. The photos from 5 years ago. She looked younger, softer. Tonight she looked like someone who knows exactly who she is. Seo-yeon paused. That's more dangerous than beauty. You're overthinking this. Am I? She turned to face him. Your mother hasn't attended a public event in over a year. She chose tonight. She chose her. And she chose to do it in front of every family that watched you divorce that woman. Seo-yeon's voice was steady, but her eyes were bright with something that wasn't quite anger. It was fear. That's not a social call, Taehyun. That's a statement. He looked out the window. The Han River was a dark ribbon beneath the bridges, patient and indifferent. I'll handle it, he said. You keep saying that. About everything. Your mother. The Jong family's challenges to your shipping routes. The prosecutors circling your Busan operations. She lowered her voice. And now your ex-wife appears in the same room as your current fiancé, escorted by your own mother. And you'll handle it. Yes. The single word contained no reassurance. It was a door closing. Seo-yeon turned back to her window and did not speak again until they reached the Hanam-dong penthouse, where she said goodnight with the precise courtesy of a woman who understood she had just been shown her position in a hierarchy she hadn't known existed. Alone in his study, Taehyun removed his jacket. His dress shirt was open at the collar, revealing the edge of a tattoo that climbed from his left collarbone toward his neck. In the low light, the design was barely visible, interlocking patterns that merged Korean geometric motifs with Ghanaian Adinkra symbols. The central figure was Sankofa, a bird reaching back to retrieve an egg from its own spine. Return and get it, learn from the past. He had gotten the tattoo 3 months after the divorce, alone, in a small shop in Yongsan run by a Senegalese artist who asked no questions. He had told no one, not Junho, not his mother, not the succession of women who had briefly occupied his attention in the years since. The tattoo was a private wound, a reminder etched in ink because the one etched in memory was not permanent enough. He poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows. Seoul sprawled beneath him, 43 floors of distance between himself and the world he controlled. He controlled the Kong Syndicate's operations across 6 countries. He controlled shipping lanes, luxury hotel chains, private security contracts, and political relationships that shaped legislation. He controlled everything, except the look in Amara's eyes when she had glanced at him for 2 seconds, and then looked away. That look, calm, knowing, unbroken, had dismantled something inside him that he had spent 5 years constructing. He pressed his bandaged hand against the cold glass. "Why are you here?" he whispered to the city. To her. To the ghost of a marriage he had killed with his own hands. The city did not answer. It never did. 3 weeks earlier, the calm countryside estate, Payu, Gyeonggi Province. The villa sat nestled against a hillside overlooking rice terraces that had belonged to the Kong family for 7 generations. In spring, the fields would flood with shallow water, turning the landscape into a mirror of clouds. In February, they were dormant, brown, patient, waiting. Lady Kong Hairin walked the stone path to the guest house, where Amara waited. She walked slowly, not from frailty but from deliberation. Every step she took toward this conversation was a step away from the lie she had maintained for 5 years. She was not a woman who lied easily, but she was a woman who understood that some truths, delivered too early, become weapons instead of medicine. Amara sat on the ondal-heated floor, her legs tucked beneath her, a cup of green tea cooling in her hands. She wore a simple cream sweater and dark trousers. No jewelry, no armor. She had come because Lady Kong had asked, and because, despite everything, she had never been able to refuse this woman. Lady Kong entered and sat across from her. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two women who had shared a language deeper than words and were now deciding whether to speak it again. "You look tired, Yamianim," Amara said softly. "I am tired. I have been tired for 5 years." Lady Kong set her hands flat on her knees. "I owe you something that I cannot repay. But I can begin." "Begin with what?" "The truth." Lady Kang's eyes, dark, intelligent, carrying decades of strategy and sorrow, held Amara's gaze without flinching. "About why I made my son divorce you." The tea in Amara's cup trembled. She set it down carefully. "You made him." Taehyun believes he made the decision himself. He believes the evidence he was shown, the fabricated documents, the manipulated photographs, the false testimony from a staff member I had paid. He believes you were involved in leaking syndicate information to the Jong family. He believes you betrayed him. Amara's voice was barely audible, and he never questioned it. He questioned it every day. But I made certain the evidence was overwhelming enough to overcome his doubt. "I am." Lady Kang's voice cracked, a sound so rare and so human that Amara flinched. "I am very good at building cases that cannot be challenged. It is how I survived 40 years in this family." "Why?" The word came from somewhere deep inside Amara's chest. Not angry, not accusatory, devastated. "Why would you do that to us?" Lady Kong reached into the sleeve of her hanbok and withdrew a folded document, old, creased, handled many times. She placed it on the floor between them. 3 months before the divorce, I intercepted a communication between 2 senior members of the Kong Council, my husband's oldest allies. They had decided that your presence in the family was a vulnerability, not because of your character, because of your visibility. The Kong Syndicate was entering a succession war. My husband was dying, though he hid it from everyone except me. Taehyun was the heir, but 3 other factions within the organization wanted to challenge his claim. She paused. Her fingers pressed harder against her knees. They concluded that the most effective way to destabilize Taehyun was to harm you. Not threaten, not intimidate, eliminate. A foreign wife with no powerful Korean family behind her was the perfect target. Your death would be blamed on outside enemies. Taehyun would be consumed by grief and rage. He would make mistakes, and the council would install someone more controllable. Amara stared at the document. She did not touch it. "I had 2 choices," Lady Kong continued. "I could warn Taehyun, and he would go to war against his own council, a war he was not yet strong enough to win. Or I could remove you from the equation entirely, make the separation so public, so humiliating, that no one would believe Taehyun still cared about you. If you were discarded and shamed, you were no longer a useful target. You became irrelevant to their strategy." "Irrelevant," Amara repeated. The word tasted like ash. "Alive," Lady Kong corrected gently. "You became alive. That was the only outcome I cared about." Silence filled the room. Outside, a magpie called from the persimmon tree. "Does he know?" Amara whispered. "Any of it?" "No." He consolidated power over the following 3 years. The factions were dismantled. The men who planned your death are no longer in positions of influence. 2 are dead. 1 is imprisoned, and the last lives in exile in Macau. The threat is gone. Lady Kang's voice hardened with something that might have been pride. "My son became exactly the leader I needed him to become. But the cost." She stopped. For the first time in their conversation, she looked away. "The cost was you. And him. And what you were together." Amara's eyes were bright, but she did not cry. She had spent 5 years learning how not to cry in front of people. The skill had become so practiced that sometimes she wondered if she had forgotten how. "You could have told me," she said. "At any point in 5 years, you could have. And put you back in danger? Until every thread was cut. Until every enemy was neutralized. Telling you the truth meant risking your safety. You might have contacted Taehyun. You might have tried to return, and if anyone suspected the divorce was theater. Lady Kong shook her head. It could not be theater, Amara. It had to be real. Your pain had to be real. His anger had to be real. Only authenticity would protect you. My pain was real. I know. Lady Kang's voice broke fully now, a fracture running through decades of composure. I know it was, and I have carried that knowledge every single day. She reached across the space between them and took Amara's hands. Her grip was firm but trembling. I am asking you to come to the gala. I am asking you to stand beside me in front of the same world that watched you fall. Not for revenge. Not for spectacle. She squeezed Amara's hands. For restoration. You deserve to be seen as what you are. What you have always been. My daughter. Amara looked down at their joined hands. Lady Kang's pale, lined fingers wrapped around her own dark, steady ones. Two women. Two cultures. Two kinds of strength that the world had tried to set against each other. And Taehyun, she asked. He will be there. He will see you. And then, when the time is right, he will learn what I did, what it cost, and what it means. What does it mean? Lady Kong held her gaze. It means I loved you both enough to break you apart, and now I love you both enough to face what that breaking did. The report arrived on Taehyun's desk at 7 a.m. Junho had not slept. 14 pages. Single-spaced. Comprehensive. The African Cultural Heritage Foundation. Founded 4 years ago. Legal registration in Seoul, with satellite offices in Accra and Nairobi. Annual operating budget of 3 billion won. Modest by Kong standards. Extraordinary for a solo founder with no corporate backing. Funding sources. Korean government cultural grants. UNESCO partnerships, private donations from a network of supporters spanning 12 countries. Board members included a former Korean ambassador to Ethiopia, a Ghanaian telecommunications mogul, and a retired professor from Seoul National University. No connection to the Kong family. No mention of Taehyun. No interviews referencing the marriage. Nothing. She had built it clean. Taehyun read every page twice. Then he set the report down and stared at the wall. For years. She had been in Seoul for 4 years building something extraordinary, and he had not known. His intelligence network, the same network that tracked rival syndicates across 3 continents, had not flagged the presence of his own ex-wife operating a major cultural organization less than 15 kilometers from his penthouse. Because she had not been hiding. She had simply been living a life that no longer intersected with his. That realization hurt more than the fabricated betrayal ever had. He picked up his phone and dialed. It rang twice. Mother. Lady Kang's voice was calm. Good morning, Taehyun. We need to talk. Yes, we do. But not on the phone. Come to Payu. This Saturday. I want answers now. Saturday. There are things I need to show you that cannot be spoken. They must be seen. He clenched his jaw. The tattoo on his collarbone seemed to pulse beneath his shirt. Saturday, he agreed. But I will not wait beyond that. You have waited 5 years, my son. 3 more days will not kill you. She hung up before he could respond. On Thursday evening, Amara hosted a private preview at her foundation's gallery in Samcheongdong. The exhibition, *Threads Between, Textile Conversations Across Continents feature collaborative works created by Ghanaian Kent weavers and Korean Mosi fabric artisans. Each piece was accompanied by video interviews with the artists, exploring the parallels between their techniques and the cultural meanings embedded in their patterns. The gallery was intimate. 40 guests. Curated lighting. A cellist playing in the corner. A young Korean woman performing an arrangement that wove traditional Akan melodies into a Korean folk structure. Amara moved through the space with natural grace, explaining the works, introducing the artists via video link, answering questions with the kind of depth that revealed genuine passion rather than rehearsed expertise. She did not know that Taehyun was watching. He stood outside the gallery, across the narrow street, half hidden by the shadow of a traditional Hana gate. He wore a dark overcoat, collar turned up. No security detail. He had come alone. Something Junho would have severely objected to if he had known. Through the gallery's wide windows, he could see her. She was speaking to an older Korean man, a professor type, gray-haired, animated. She laughed at something he said, and the sound, though muffled by glass and distance, reached Taehyun like a blade. He remembered that laugh. He had heard it first in a cramped university cafe in Hongdae, 6 years ago, when a mutual friend had introduced them and Amara had been trying to explain Ghanaian naming traditions to a table of confused Korean linguistics students. "Your day name determines your soul's temperament," she had said, her eyes bright with the pleasure of sharing something she loved. "I was born on a Saturday, so my soul name is Alma. It means I am patient." She had smiled, though my mother would disagree. He had fallen in love with her over the course of that single conversation. Not because she was beautiful, though she was. Not because she was foreign and fascinating, though she was that too. He had fallen in love because she spoke about identity with the kind of reverence he had only ever seen applied to Korean ancestral rites. She understood that names carry weight, that tradition is architecture, that you do not discard the old to build the new. You weave them together. Standing in the cold street, watching her through glass, Taehyun pressed his palm against the Hana gate. The bandaged cut on his hand throbbed beneath the gauze. A couple exited the gallery, and the door opened briefly, releasing a wave of warmth and conversation. For 1 second, he heard her voice clearly, mid-sentence, explaining the significance of a particular Adinkra symbol. *I star. It means except for God. It represents the omnipotence and immortality of the Creator. You'll find it woven into burial cloths and wedding garments alike. It reminds us that there are forces larger than our pain, larger than our pride, larger than our pride. He turned and walked away, but he came back the next evening and stood in the same spot and watched her again. Saturday, the Kong countryside estate. Taehyun arrived at noon. His mother was waiting in the main house, seated in the traditional receiving room, the same room where Kong family decisions had been made for a century. Calligraphy scrolls hung on the walls. A low table held tea and dried persimmons. The ondal floor radiated warmth. He entered and sat across from her. He did not remove his coat. The gesture was deliberate. He did not intend to stay long. Lady Kong poured tea, as though they had all the time in the world. "Remove your coat, Taehyun. You look like a man preparing to flee." "I'm not here for tea. You are here for truth. Truth takes time. Remove your coat." He stared at her for 3 seconds. Then slowly, he shrugged off the coat. Beneath it, he wore a charcoal cashmere sweater, the sleeves pushed slightly back. The tattoo on his wrist, a smaller extension of the main design, an interlocking pattern of Korean and African geometric forms, was visible. Lady Kong glanced at it. Her expression did not change, but something moved behind her eyes. She had not known about the tattoo. "When did you get that?" she asked quietly. "After." One word. After. It contained entire history. She nodded slowly, then pushed a worn leather folder across the table. "Read." He opened it. Inside were documents, photographs, transcripts, and handwritten notes in his mother's precise calligraphy. He read the first page. A detailed account of a council meeting held 6 years ago, 3 months before his divorce. Attendees, for senior members of the Kong Syndicate Council. Agenda item, resolution of the succession vulnerability posed by the foreign wife. His hand stopped on the page. He looked up at his mother. "Keep reading," she said. He read. Minutes became an hour. The tea grew cold. Outside, clouds moved across the hillside, casting traveling shadows over the dormant rice fields. He read about the plan to eliminate Amara, the coded communications, the contingency scenarios. He read his mother's interception of the plan, her private meeting with the council's ringleader, her negotiation, her realization that the only way to save Amara was to make the world believe she no longer mattered to Taehyun. He read about the fabricated evidence, the planted documents, the bribed staff member, the carefully constructed narrative of betrayal, designed not to incriminate Amara legally, but to destroy her emotionally in Taehyun's eyes and publicly in the eyes of society. He read about his mother's private agony, journal entries written in the months after the divorce, never shared, never shown to anyone until now. March 15. * He came for dinner tonight. He ate very little. He does not speak of her, but he has stopped sleeping through the night. The housekeeper reports that his bedroom light stays on until 4 a.m. I have done this to him. I have done this to them both. God forgive me. I cannot forgive myself. Asterisk. June 2. Asterisk. I received word that she found work. A translation position at a law firm. She is living in Mulliedong. Alone. I wanted to send money anonymously. I could not risk it. Any connection could be traced. She must remain disconnected from us. She must remain safe. The distance is the safety. Asterisk. October 28. Asterisk. She started a blog about African art and Korean culture. It is beautifully written. She writes in 3 languages, English, Korean, and Chui. She is brilliant. She was always brilliant. And I fed her to the wolves to save her from the lions. Asterisk. Taehyun closed the folder. His hands were trembling. Not from anger. From something far worse. From the slow, crushing realization that the foundation of every decision he had made for 5 years, every cold night, every suppressed memory, every time he had told himself that she had betrayed him and that he was right to let her go, all of it was built on a lie his own mother had constructed, to save the woman he loved. You! His voice fractured. He stopped, pressed his fingers against his eyes. Breathe. You let me believe she was guilty. Yes. You watched me destroy her in public. Yes. You watched me become someone who could do that, who could stand behind a podium and end a woman's life with a press statement, and you said nothing. Yes. Why? The word erupted from him. Not a shout, but a rupture. The sound of a man whose internal architecture was collapsing. Lady Kong did not flinch. She had been preparing for this moment for 5 years. She had rehearsed it, dreaded it, needed it. Because you would have gone to war, she said steadily. You would have challenged the council. You would have fought to protect her. And you would have lost. Not because you are weak, because you were not yet ready. You were 34. You had been heir for less than 2 years. The council had decades of embedded power. They would have destroyed you and killed her. And the Kong family would have fallen to men who saw power as consumption rather than stewardship. She leaned forward. I chose her life over your happiness. I chose your future over your present. And I chose to carry the blame alone because that is what mothers do. We carry what our children cannot. The silence that followed was absolute. The kind of silence that exists at the center of an explosion, after the shock wave has passed, and before the debris begins to fall. Taehyun stood. His chair scraped against the wooden floor. I need to go. Taehyun. I cannot be in this room right now. His voice was controlled again, but the control was thin, brittle. I need to think. There is more. More. He laughed, a terrible hollow sound. What more could there possibly be? She never stopped being your wife. In her heart. In mine. Lady Kang's voice was barely a whisper. She wore her wedding ring on a chain around her neck for 3 years. I know because I had someone watching over her, from a distance. Always from a distance. Taehyun closed his eyes. He stood motionless for an eternity compressed into 15 seconds. Then he walked out. He drove back to Seoul at speeds that would have frightened Junho. The highway blurred. The city swallowed him. He went not to his penthouse, but to the empty parking garage beneath the Kong Corporation headquarters. We sat in his car in the dark for 2 hours, his forehead pressed against the steering wheel, the engine off, the silence complete. He did not cry. He had not cried since he was 11 years old, when his father had struck him for showing emotion during a business dinner and told him that tears were a currency only the weak could afford. But his body shook, and on his wrist, the tattoo, the Sankofa bird, reaching back for what was lost, seemed to burn. Monday, the Shilla Hotel. A private luncheon hosted by the Korean African Business Council, an organization Amara had helped establish 2 years earlier. 60 attendees. Diplomats, entrepreneurs, cultural figures. Taehyun was not supposed to be there. Junho had flagged the event in his daily briefing, noting Amara's participation as a keynote speaker. Taehyun had said nothing. At 11 a.m., he instructed his driver to take him to the Shilla. He arrived during Amara's address. He stood at the back of the room, unannounced, unnoticed by most, but not by her. She was mid-sentence when she saw him. Her voice caught, a micro-pause, barely perceptible, but he caught it, and she knew he caught it. She continued speaking. Her topic was the economic potential of cultural partnerships between West Africa and South Korea. She spoke with authority, data, and warmth. She cited specific examples from her foundation's work. She made the audience laugh with a story about a Korean textile student who had tried to learn Kent weaving and accidentally created a pattern that, in a Kan tradition, meant my mother-in-law is watching. The room laughed. Taehyun did not. He was watching her with the concentrated stillness of a man seeing something clearly for the first time. After the address, the room broke into conversation clusters. Taehyun moved through them with his customary gravity. People parted. Greetings were offered. He acknowledged them minimally. He was heading toward her. Amara saw him coming and felt her pulse accelerate. She was speaking with Dr. Kwame Asante, a Ghanaian-born economics professor at Yonsei University, a dear friend, a trusted advisor, and the man who had helped her draft the foundation's first grant proposal. Kwame was tall, warm, distinguished, with an easy smile and a deep laugh that filled whatever room he occupied. Amara, Kwame was saying, the minister wants to discuss the scholarship expansion. Can you meet Tuesday? Of course. She kept her voice steady. I'll adjust my schedule. Taehyun arrived. He stopped 3 feet away. Close enough to speak. Far enough to maintain the distance that propriety demanded. Ms. Mensah. The formality was a blade. Ms. Mensah, not Amara. Not the name he used to whisper against her hair in the early hours of the morning, when Seoul was asleep, and they were the only two people alive in the world. She turned to face him. Her expression was composed. Her eyes were not. Mr. Calm. 3 feet of air between them. 5 years of wreckage beneath it. Kwame glanced between them with the perceptiveness of a man who understood subtext. I'll let you two catch up, he said warmly, touching Amara's elbow briefly before stepping away. Taehyun's gaze tracked the touch. The briefest flicker in his jaw, a muscle tightening, releasing. Jealousy was an emotion he had always considered beneath him. He was wrong. Your address was impressive, he said. Thank you. The foundation's work, I wasn't aware of its scope. There was no reason you would be. A silence. Not comfortable. Not hostile. Loaded. You've been in Seoul, he said. For years. Yes. And you never. He stopped himself. What was he going to say? Asterisk and you never called? Never reached out? Never gave me the chance to. Asterisk. To what? Apologize. He hadn't known he needed to until 3 days ago. I built a life, Amara said quietly. The life I needed to build. It required distance. From me. From everything that happened. He studied her face. The soft expressiveness of her eyes. The way she held her chin. Not raised in defiance, but level. Equal. She was not performing strength. She simply possessed it. My mother, he began, is a remarkable woman. Amar's voice carried a gentleness that surprised him. She always was. She seems to have been in contact with you. Recently. Yes. How recently? Amara hesitated. This was not her truth to reveal. Lady Kong had been specific about the sequence. Perhaps that's a conversation you should have with her. I've had conversations with my mother. They raised more questions than they answered. Then perhaps you need more conversations. He almost smiled. Almost. The corner of his mouth moved a fraction. A gesture so subtle that anyone else would have missed it. Amara did not miss it. She had spent 2 years of marriage learning to read the microscopic shifts in his expression, the way astronomers read light from distant stars. Dr. Asante, Taehyun said, changing direction abruptly. He seems close to you. He is a colleague and a friend. A good friend. Amara met his gaze directly. A loyal one. The word loyal hung between them like smoke. Taehyun held her gaze for 3 long seconds. Then he nodded once, a formal, controlled gesture that revealed nothing and everything, and turned to leave. He was 4 steps away when she spoke. The tattoo. He stopped. He did not turn around. On your wrist, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I noticed it at the gala. That symbol. Sankofa. Silence. Go back and get it, she translated. Return to the past and retrieve what was lost. He stood motionless. The room buzzed around them. 60 people in conversation, and neither of them heard a single word. "I know what it means," he said finally, quietly, to the air in front of him, to her, to himself. Then he walked away, and Amara stood perfectly still in the middle of the luncheon, surrounded by diplomats and economists, and pressed her hand against her sternum where, for 3 years, a wedding ring had hung on a chain. The chain was gone now. The ring was locked in a box in her apartment, but her heart remembered its weight. Tuesday morning, Kong Corporation headquarters, the top floor. Junho placed a second folder on Taehyun's desk, and this one did not contain Cultural Foundation reports. "The Jong family," Junho said. "They're moving." Taehyun opened the folder. Inside were surveillance photographs, intercepted communications, and financial analysis. The Jong Syndicate, the Kong family's oldest rival, had been quietly acquiring properties in Gangnam and Yongsan. Shell companies. Layered ownership. A pattern Taehyun recognized immediately. "They're building a corridor," he said. "Yes. And the endpoint," Junho pointed to a map, "is here." A red circle around a building in Sancheongdong. Amara's gallery. Taehyun's expression did not change, but something behind his eyes went cold. Arctic. The kind of cold that precedes violence, so precise it barely disturbs the air. "Why?" "We're still determining the full picture. But Jong Myung-soo has been asking questions about the African Cultural Heritage Foundation, specifically about its funding sources and its connection to your family." "There is no connection to my family. There doesn't need to be a real one. Myung-soo only needs to suggest one. If he can create the appearance that Amara's foundation is a Kong front, a money laundering channel, a political influence operation, he can use it to trigger a government investigation. Not against her. Against you. Using her as a weapon." Taehyun's voice was flat. Again. Junho said nothing. He understood the implications of that word. Asterisk again asterisk. And he understood that his boss was not merely analyzing a strategic threat. He was confronting a personal one. "There's more." Junho placed a photograph on the desk. It showed Jong Myung-soo, 45, handsome in a predatory way, immaculately dressed, entering a restaurant in Cheongdam-dong. Beside him walked Yoon Seo-yeon. Taehyun studied the photograph. "When was this taken?" "Last Thursday, the night of the gallery preview." "The same evening I was standing outside the gallery watching your ex-wife." "Yes." Junho's tone was carefully neutral. "While you were in Sancheongdong, your fiancé was dining with Jong Myung-soo in Cheongdam." Taehyun set the photograph down. He aligned it precisely with the edge of the desk. "Find out what they discussed. Find out how long this has been happening. And increase surveillance on the Sancheongdong gallery. I want a security team within 200 meters at all times. Discreet. She is not to know. Amara. Ms. Mensah is not to know she's being protected. She would refuse it." Junho nodded. He had met Amara twice during the marriage, brief, formal encounters. But he remembered her clearly. He remembered the way she had insisted on learning every bodyguard's name. The way she had brought homemade jollof rice to the security office on Chuseok. The way she had made the men who protected her feel like people rather than functions. He also remembered the day of the divorce announcement. He had been standing behind Taehyun at the podium. He had watched Amara's face on the monitor. The moment she saw the broadcast, standing in the kitchen of their penthouse, a bowl of rice in her hands. The bowl had slipped. Rice scattered across the marble floor like white tears. He had never told Taehyun about that image. "Some things are too heavy to deliver. I'll handle it," Junho said. He was at the door when Taehyun spoke again. "Junho." "Yes." "The ring she wore. On a chain. My mother mentioned it. Do you know if she—" He stopped, pressed his lips together, shook his head slightly, as though arguing with himself. "Never mind." Junho nodded and left. The question hung in the empty office like incense smoke, present, fading, impossible to ignore. But this time, Taehyun did not come alone, and he did not come to listen. He arrived at 4 p.m. with the quiet fury of a man who had spent an entire week reconstructing his understanding of the last 5 years and found nothing but rubble. Lady Kong was in the garden, pruning a bonsai juniper that was older than the Korean War. She wore gardening gloves over her elegant hands. a contradiction that perfectly captured her character. "You lied to me for 5 years," he said, standing at the garden gate. "I saved her for 5 years." Lady Kong replied without looking up. "You don't get to decide that." "I was the only one who could decide that. You were in love. Love makes men brave and stupid in equal measure. You would have fought the council. You would have exposed the conspiracy. And they would have killed her before you finished your first sentence. You don't know that." Now she looked up. Her gaze was steel-wrapped in silk. "I knew your father's world better than he did. I navigated it for 40 years. I watched 3 women die because their husbands chose honor over strategy. I was not going to let Amara become the 4th. Taehyun stepped into the garden, his shoes pressed into the gravel path, with deliberate weight. "You made me into a monster. Do you understand that? I stood in front of cameras and destroyed the one person who—" His voice broke. He sealed it shut, breathed. "The one person who ever looked at me and saw something other than the Kong name." Lady Kong set down her pruning shears. She removed her gloves slowly, one finger at a time. "Yes," she said, "I made you into something terrible, because the alternative was making her into something dead." The wind moved through the garden, carrying the scent of pine and cold earth. "There is something else you need to know," Lady Kong said. She folded her gloves and placed them on the stone bench. "Seo-yun." His jaw tightened. "What about her?" "She is not what you think she is. Her family's shipping conglomerate has been in financial distress for 2 years, hidden from public filings, masked by shell companies. The same shell companies now being used by Jong Myung-soo to acquire property around Amara's gallery." Taehyun went still. Completely, dangerously still. Seo-yun's father made a deal with Myung-soo 18 months ago. Financial rescue in exchange for access. Access to you. To the Kong family's operations. To information that could be used as leverage. "You're telling me my engagement is a Jong operation. I am telling you that the woman sharing your bed is sharing your secrets with the family that has been trying to destroy us for 30 years. The garden was silent except for the distant sound of water moving through the stone fountain. "And Amara?" Taehyun's voice was barely audible. "Is she at risk?" "Amara is the collateral damage they are willing to create to bring you down. She always has been. That is why I brought her back into the light. Because hiding her no longer protects her. The Jong family already knows she exists. They are already circling." Lady Kong stood and faced her son with the full weight of her 68 years. Every sacrifice, every lie, every sleepless night compressed into a single unwavering gaze. The only way to protect her now is to stand beside her, publicly, permanently, and to destroy the people who see her as a weapon instead of a woman. Taehyun stared at his mother. For the first time in 5 years, the mask, the Iron Shadow, the untouchable syndicate leader, the man who controlled everything, cracked. And behind it was just a man who had lost something precious, and was only now beginning to understand the full dimensions of that loss. "I need to see her," he said. "I know," Lady Kong replied. "She won't want to see me." "You're probably right." "How do I?" He stopped, swallowed. "How do I begin to repair something I didn't even know I broke?" Lady Kong crossed the garden and did something she had not done since he was a child. She placed her hand against his cheek. Her palm was cool from the February air, but her touch was warm. "You begin," she said softly, "by telling the truth, even when the truth makes you the villain of your own story." Amara came here when the noise inside her became louder than the noise outside. She had discovered the temple during her first winter alone, wandering through Jeonju-gu in a thin coat, hollow with grief, searching for somewhere that did not require her to explain herself or perform composure. The temple had offered silence, without judgment, incense without interrogation, a wooden bench beneath a white pine where she could sit and let the tears come without anyone trying to fix them. She had returned hundreds of times since. In every season, through every chapter of her rebuilding, the monks knew her by sight now. They called her Sunim Chingu, friend of the temple. They never asked questions. They simply let her be. Today, she sat on her usual bench, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of barley tea from the temple shop. The February air was sharp but windless. Lanterns hung in colored rows above the courtyard, still and patient, waiting for Buddha's birthday months away. She heard his footsteps before she saw him. She knew them, the measured rhythm, the deliberate weight of each step. Some things the body remembers, even when the mind has tried to archive them. Taehyun appeared at the edge of the courtyard. He wore a dark wool coat, no scarf, collar open. The tattoo on his collarbone was partially visible, the upper curve of the Sankofa bird disappearing beneath charcoal cashmere. He looked like he had not slept. The shadows beneath his eyes were deeper than they had been at the gala, and the controlled tension in his posture had shifted from authority to something closer to exhaustion. He stopped 12 feet away. He did not approach further. "Your assistant told me you might be here," he said. "Jian talks too much." She was concerned. "I called the foundation office. She said you had canceled your afternoon meetings." Amara looked at him over the rim of her cup. "And you took that as an invitation?" "I took it as an opening. I have very few of those with you." She said nothing for a long moment. A monk crossed the courtyard carrying a wooden bucket, his robes sweeping the stone. The sound of water being poured into a basin echoed softly. "Sit down," Amara said finally. "You look terrible." He almost smiled. Almost. He sat on the opposite end of the bench, maintaining the distance between them with architectural precision, close enough to speak quietly, far enough that their shoulders would not accidentally touch. They sat in silence for nearly 3 minutes. The temple breathed around them, incense, pine, cold stone, ancient wood. "My mother told me everything," Taehyun said. Amara's hands tightened around her cup. "Everything. The council's plan, the fabricated evidence, her decision to." He paused, searching for words that did not exist in any language he spoke. "To engineer our destruction in order to save your life." Amara stared straight ahead. The lanterns blurred slightly through the moisture gathering in her eyes, but she blinked it away with practiced discipline. "How do you feel?" she asked. The question surprised him. He had expected anger, accusations, the righteous fury of a woman who had been wronged on a scale that most people could not comprehend. Instead, she was asking how he felt, as though his pain mattered alongside hers. "I feel like I have been living in a building I thought was solid," he said slowly, "and someone has just shown me that the foundation was made of paper. Everything I believed, every decision, every justification, every wall I built to convince myself that letting you go was correct, all of it was constructed on a lie." He looked down at his hands. The cut from the champagne glass had healed, leaving a thin pink line across his palm. "I don't know how to stand in a building like that." Amara set her cup down on the bench between them. The gesture was small but deliberate, placing something in the space that separated them, as though testing whether the space could hold anything at all. "I spent 2 years hating you," she said quietly. "Every morning, I woke up and the first thing I felt was hatred. Not sadness. Hatred. It was the cleanest emotion I had. Everything else was complicated. Grief, confusion, shame, loneliness. But hatred was simple. It had a direction. It pointed at you." She paused. "Then one morning, I woke up and the hatred was gone. Just gone. Like a fever breaking. And what was underneath it was worse." Her voice dropped. "Love. Still there. Unchanged. Completely untouched by everything you had done to me. I hated you for 2 years, and the love didn't even notice." Taehyun's breathing changed. A slight catch. A controlled recovery. Imperceptible to anyone who was not listening for it. She was listening. "I wanted to contact you," he said. "Hundreds of times. I wrote messages I never sent. I drove past places we used to go. He stopped. Started again. I stood outside your gallery. Twice. This past week. Like a ghost haunting a house he burned down." "I know." He looked at her sharply. "You knew I was there. My security camera faces the street." The faintest trace of something appeared at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile. The memory of where a smile might live. "You're not as invisible as you think, Taehyun." The sound of his name, his first name, in her voice, with the slight Ghanaian softening of the consonants that had always made it sound like a word in a language only they spoke, broke something open in his chest that he could not close again. "Amara." He said her name like a man saying it for the first time. like a man who had forbidden himself from saying it for 5 years and was now discovering that the prohibition had only made the word more powerful. I am sorry. 2 words. Insufficient. Absurd. A thimble offered to contain an ocean. I know that sorry is. He shook his head. I know it means nothing compared to what was done. I stood behind a podium and told the world that you were unworthy of my family. I let you walk out of my life, carrying a shame that was never yours. And I never investigated, never questioned, never once considered that the evidence might be. Your mother's evidence was very good, Amara said gently. She knows your mind. She knew exactly what would convince you. That doesn't excuse me. Nothing excuses me. No, Amara agreed. It doesn't. The honesty was clean and merciless. And somehow, precisely because she did not try to minimize his failure, the space between them became slightly more bearable. I'm not ready to forgive you, she said. I may never be fully ready. What happened to me? The public humiliation, the isolation, the years of rebuilding from nothing. Those things live in my body. They're not abstract. I feel them when I walk into a room full of Korean socialites who remember my name from tabloid headlines. I feel them when someone Googles me and the first result is still that press conference. She turned to face him directly. Her eyes were bright and steady and devastating. But I need you to understand something. Your mother did not destroy our marriage to hurt us. She destroyed it because she was the only person in your world with the courage and the intelligence to see the danger, and the only person willing to sacrifice her own son's happiness to protect someone she loved. Taehyun stared at her. You're defending her. I'm seeing her clearly. Something you and I were both too hurt to do for 5 years. A bell rang somewhere inside the temple. A deep, resonant tone that moved through the courtyard like a wave, touching everything, demanding nothing. What happens now? He asked. Amara picked up her cup. The tea was cold. She drank it anyway. Now you go home, and you deal with the things your mother told you about Seo-yeon and the Jong family, because that storm is coming whether we're ready or not. And Taehyun. She looked at him one final time. Deal with it honestly. No more press conferences built on lies. No more sacrificing people to protect appearances. If you've truly changed, then change how you fight. She stood, gathered her coat, and walked toward the temple gate. He watched her go. The way she moved through space with a grace that was entirely her own. Unhurried, unperformed. A woman who had learned to carry herself because no one else was going to do it for her. At the gate, she paused without turning around. The tattoo, she said. The Sankofa. Yes, you can go back and retrieve what was lost, but you have to do it with clean hands. Then she left, and Taehyun sat on the bench alone, surrounded by lanterns and incense, and the weight of 5 years of wreckage, and let the silence hold him the way he wished he could have held her. Taehyun had spent 3 days assembling the evidence. Junho's team had been thorough. Financial records linking the Yoon shipping conglomerate to Jong Myung-soo's shell companies. Encrypted communications between Seo-yeon and Myung-soo's intermediary. Records of property acquisitions surrounding Amar's gallery and foundation offices. The picture was comprehensive and damning. Seo-yeon's engagement to Taehyun had been a Trojan horse from the beginning. Her father's company was drowning, and Jong Myung-soo had offered a lifeline in exchange for intelligence about the Kong Syndicate's operations. Seo-yeon's role was access, intimacy, proximity to decisions and conversations that could be weaponized. And the final phase of the plan, the reason for the property acquisitions around Samcheong-dong, was to manufacture a public connection between Amara's foundation and the Kong Syndicate, triggering a government investigation that would expose Taehyun's underground operations while simultaneously destroying Amara's reputation. Again, the elegance of the plan disgusted him. Not because it was clever. He expected cleverness from Myung-soo, but because it used the same weapon his own mother had used 5 years earlier. It turned Amara into collateral. It treated her life as a chess piece. He would not let it happen again. Seo-yeon arrived at the boardroom at 12:15. Summoned by a message that said only, asterisk come. Now asterisk. She entered wearing a cream silk blouse and tailored trousers, her hair pulled back, her expression carefully composed. She had learned over 7 months that midnight summons from Taehyun were never about intimacy. They were about business. She was wrong this time. This was about everything. Sit down, Taehyun said. He was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows. Seoul glittered beneath him. The tattoo on his neck was visible above his open collar. The tail feather of the Sankofa bird, curved like a question mark. Seo-yeon sat. She crossed her legs. She waited. He turned and placed a single photograph on the table. Her dinner with Jong Myung-soo. Chong Dam-dong. The Thursday night of the gallery preview. She looked at it. Her face did not change, but her hands, those betrayed her. A slight curl of the fingers. A tightening of the tendons. Micro-movements that Taehyun read the way a surgeon reads x-rays. I can explain, she said. You cannot. His voice was quiet, level. The voice of a man who had already processed his anger and arrived at something colder. Decision. Myung-soo has been financing your father's company for 18 months. In exchange, you've been providing intelligence about my operations, my schedule, my vulnerabilities. The engagement was a delivery mechanism. Seo-yeon's composure cracked. Not dramatically. She was too well trained for dramatic cracks. But the crack was there. A fracture line running through the porcelain. My father was going to lose everything, she said. Our family, 3 generations of. I understand family loyalty. Taehyun interrupted. Better than you realize. But you chose to protect your family by betraying mine. And you chose to do it by helping Myung-soo target a woman who has already been destroyed once by the people around me. Amara. Seo-yeon's voice sharpened. This is about her. This is about the fact that Jong Myung-soo plans to use her foundation as a weapon against me. And you have been helping him build that weapon. Whether you understood the full scope or not, you participated. Seo-yeon stood. Her chair rolled back, silently on the carpet. You still love her. It was not a question. After everything, the divorce, the years apart, you still love that woman. Taehyun met her gaze, with absolute stillness. He did not deny it. He did not confirm it. He simply looked at her, with an expression that answered her question more completely than any words could have. The engagement is over, he said. Your belongings will be sent to your family's residence by tomorrow evening. I will not pursue legal action against your father if you cooperate fully with my security team's debriefing. Every communication, every meeting, every piece of information you pass to Myung-soo, I want all of it documented. And if I refuse, then I will pursue legal action, and I will be thorough. Seo-yeon stared at him for a long, trembling moment. Then something in her seemed to give way. Not collapse, but release. The tension of 7 months of deception leaving her body, like air from a punctured tire. She's lucky, Seo-yeon said quietly, to be loved by someone who dismantles his entire life to protect her. She would disagree with the word lucky. Given what my love has cost her. Seo-yeon picked up her purse, walked to the door, and paused with her hand on the frame. For what it's worth, I liked her. At the gala, she carried herself like someone who knows exactly what she survived. A bitter, honest smile. I hope I learn to carry myself that way. She left. The door clicked shut behind her with the soft finality of an ending that had been inevitable from the moment Amara Mensah walked back into the ballroom of the Grand Hyatt Seoul. Lady Kong called the family together. Not the Syndicate Council, the family. 27 members of the Kong bloodline gathered in the Great Hall of the ancestral estate for the first full family assembly in 3 years. Cousins, uncles, aunts. The old guard and the new generation. They arrived in black sedans and sat in traditional formation around the long oak table that had hosted Kong family decisions since 1952. Amara was not present. Lady Kong had been specific. This part is not for you. This is surgery. You do not need to watch the cutting. Taehyun sat at the head of the table. His mother sat at the opposite end. Between them stretched 25 family members who ranged from fiercely loyal to cautiously resentful. Lady Kong stood. The room fell silent. 27 years ago, she began. I married into this family. I was not welcomed. I was tolerated. I earned my place through decades of service, sacrifice, and silence. I navigated wars that most of you never knew existed. I protected alliances you took for granted, and I buried truths that would have torn this family apart. She looked down the length of the table. Every face was turned toward her. 5 years ago, I orchestrated the divorce of my son from his wife, Amara Mensah. I fabricated evidence of betrayal. I manipulated my own son's trust. I destroyed a marriage that was the only genuine source of happiness I had ever seen him possess. Murmurs, shifting, the sound of shock moving through the room, like wind through tall grass. I did this because 4 members of the syndicate council, men my husband trusted, men some of you called uncles, had decided that Amara's existence was a strategic liability. They planned to eliminate her. Not remove her. Eliminate. Lady Kang's voice did not waver. I chose destruction over death. I chose to break my son's heart to save his wife's life. She placed the leather folder on the table. The same documents she had shown Tae-hyun. Evidence of the conspiracy. Names. Dates. Communications. The men responsible have been dealt with. The threat no longer exists. But the damage. Her voice shifted now. Something raw entered it. The damage I caused to 2 people I love is still unhealed, and it has been compounded by a new threat. She outlined the Jong family's operation, Seo-yun's role, Myung-soo's plan to use Amara's foundation as a weapon, the property acquisitions, the manufactured connections designed to trigger investigations. This family has spent 5 years benefiting from a sacrifice it didn't know was being made. Lady Kang continued. Amara Mensah walked away from this family with nothing. No resources. No support. No reputation. She rebuilt herself from silence and pain into a woman who represents the very best of what cross-cultural connection can be. She did this without our name. Without our money. Without our help. She paused. Today, I am asking this family to recognize what was done to her. And I am asking you to stand with my son as he corrects the greatest injustice the Kang name has ever committed. The room was still. Then Tae-hyun's aunt, Kang Min-seo, 61, the family's eldest surviving daughter, a woman known for her sharp tongue and sharper memory, spoke. I remember the girl. She made tiak with me during Chuseok. Her first attempt was terrible. A pause. The barest hint of warmth. Her second attempt was better than mine. A soft ripple of unexpected laughter moved through the room. It broke something open, not the tension, but the pretense that this was merely a strategic discussion. It was a family reckoning. And families, even powerful ones, are ultimately built on kitchens and holidays, and the memory of shared meals. What do you need from us? Aunt Min-seo asked. Tae-hyun stood. The room shifted its attention to him, like iron filings drawn to a magnet. I need unity, he said. I need the Jong operation dismantled. I need Myung-soo to understand that Amara Mensah is not a weapon to be used. She is a member of this family. And I need the public record corrected. How? His cousin asked. Tae-hyun looked at his mother. She nodded. I will make a public statement, he said, retracting the accusations made during the divorce, acknowledging that Amara was falsely maligned, and taking full responsibility for the harm caused. Silence. That will expose our internal vulnerabilities, his uncle cautioned. Our vulnerabilities are already exposed. Myung-soo has been inside our perimeter for months through Seo-yun. The only defense left is truth. Complete, public, undeniable truth. He looked around the table. 27 faces. Some skeptical. Some moved. All watching. I am not asking for your permission, he said quietly. I am asking for your support. There is a difference. One by one, slowly, with the deliberation of a family that had survived wars, occupations, dictators, and its own worst instincts, they nodded. Aunt Min-seo was first. Saturday, the National Museum of Korea. A joint exhibition opening co-hosted by Amara's Foundation and the Kang Cultural Trust. A partnership Lady Kang had quietly arranged 3 weeks earlier. 300 guests. Media. Cameras. The cultural elite of Seoul and a delegation from the Ghanaian embassy. Amara stood in the main gallery, surrounded by collaborative artworks that represented 3 years of her foundation's mission. Kent patterns woven into Korean silk. Adinkra symbols pressed into celadon ceramics. Photography projects documenting parallel traditions of ancestral reverence in Ashanti and Confucian cultures. She wore a deep burgundy gown that incorporated both Korean and Ghanaian textile elements, designed by a young soul-based designer of Nigerian descent whose work the foundation had championed. Her locks were down tonight, falling past her shoulders in thick, elegant ropes threaded with thin gold. She looked like a queen who had never needed a crown. Taehyun arrived with his mother. No fiancé, no entourage, just the two of them, the Iron Shadow and the Silver Matriarch, walking side by side into the museum with the quiet gravity of people who had come to set something right. The media noticed immediately. Cameras swiveled. Phones rose. Whispers combusted into murmurs, then into open conversation. Taehyun walked to the small podium that had been set up for the evening's remarks. He had not told Amara what he was about to do. Lady Kong had insisted. She will try to stop you. She will say it is unnecessary. She will prioritize your comfort over her own restoration. Do not let her. He adjusted the microphone. The room quieted. 5 years ago, he began, his voice cutting through the silence with surgical precision. I stood behind a podium very similar to this one and made a statement about my former wife, Amara Mensah. That statement described her conduct as incompatible with the values and expectations of the Kong family. It implied betrayal. It destroyed her reputation, and it was based entirely on fabricated evidence. The room stopped breathing. Ms. Mensah did not betray my family. She did not commit any act of disloyalty, dishonesty, or impropriety during our marriage. She was a devoted wife, a loving daughter-in-law, and a woman of extraordinary integrity. The evidence used to justify our divorce was manufactured, a necessary deception created to protect her life from an internal threat within my own organization. He paused. His eyes found Amara across the room. She was standing perfectly still, her hand pressed against her chest, her eyes wide and bright with tears she was not trying to hide. I take full responsibility for the public humiliation she endured. I take full responsibility for failing to question the narrative I was given. And I take full responsibility for every day of the last 5 years that she spent rebuilding a life that I helped destroy. His voice dropped, not from weakness, from the weight of what he was about to say. Amara Mensah is not the disgraced woman the world was told she was. She is the founder of one of Asia's most important cultural organizations. She is a bridge between continents. She is a woman of grace, resilience, and dignity that I did not deserve when I had her, and that I am not certain I deserve now. He swallowed, but I intend to spend whatever time I am given trying to be worthy of her again. He stepped back from the podium. The room erupted, not an applause, and something deeper, a collective exhale, a murmur that moved through 300 people like a current, carrying astonishment and emotion and the unmistakable recognition that they had just witnessed something rare, a powerful man standing in public and choosing truth over image. Lady Kong crossed the room to Amara. She took both of Amara's hands and held them tightly. I told you, the old woman whispered, tears on her cheeks for the first time in decades. The truth requires witnesses. Amara could not speak. She simply held Lady Kang's hands and let the tears come, not the controlled, private tears she had trained herself to shed in empty apartments and temple courtyards, but full, open, witness tears, the kind that heal because they are seen. Taehyun did not approach her that night. He understood, with the emotional intelligence that had always existed beneath his armor, but had been buried under layers of duty and control, that this moment belonged to her, not to them, to her. He watched from across the room as diplomats, artists, journalists, and cultural leaders approached Amara. He watched Dr. Kwame Asante embrace her, lifting her slightly off the ground with the force of his relief and pride. He watched his own aunt, Kong Minseo, walk up to Amara with a small wrapped package and say, in her blunt, magnificent way, I brought you tiak, your recipe. I've been making it every Chuseok since you left. He watched Amara unwrap the package and laugh through her tears, and the sound of that laugh, the same laugh he had fallen in love with in a cramped Hongdae cafe 6 years ago, told him everything he needed to know about whether redemption was possible. It was, but it would take time, and patience, and clean hands. The Jong operation collapsed over the following 2 weeks. Taehyun's public statement had detonated Myung-soo's strategy. The manufactured connection between Amara's foundation and the Kong syndicate could not survive the revelation that the divorce itself had been fraudulent. Investigators, who had been quietly building a case, found their evidence disintegrating. Myung-soo's property acquisitions, now clearly part of a hostile operation, drew scrutiny from regulators who had previously been sympathetic. Junho handled the operational dismantling with quiet efficiency. Shell companies were exposed. Financial channels were frozen. Myung-soo's intermediaries were identified and neutralized through legal channels that Taehyun insisted remain transparent. Clean, Taehyun told Junho. Everything clean. No shadows. No buried evidence. If we fight like them, we become them. Junho studied his friend's face and saw something he had not seen in 20 years of service. Openness. As though the walls Taehyun had built around himself were being taken down brick by brick. Not demolished, but deliberately, carefully deconstructed. She's changing you, Junho said. She always did, Taehyun replied. I was just too armored to feel it. 1 month later, spring. The cherry blossoms had begun. Amara sat in her gallery office, surrounded by grant applications and exhibition plans, when her assistant brought in a small wooden box with no card. Inside, wrapped in white silk, was a single object, a gold chain. The same type of chain she had used to carry her wedding ring for 3 years. This one was new, handcrafted, and at the clasp, a tiny Sankofa bird was engraved. She held it in her palm for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and called a number she had deleted 5 years ago but never forgotten. The chain is beautiful, she said when he answered. Silence on the other end. Then, I didn't know if he would call. I almost didn't. Almost is enough. His voice was quiet, unguarded. She had never heard him sound unguarded before. Even during their marriage, there had always been a layer, a membrane between himself and full vulnerability. Now that membrane was gone. Can I see you? She closed her eyes. Open them. The temple, she said. Tomorrow. 4 o'clock. I'll be there. She hung up. She clasped the chain around her neck. The Sankofa bird rested against her collarbone. Cool at first, then warm from her skin. Go back and get it. They met at the temple. They talked for 3 hours, not about the past, but about the present. About her foundation's next project. About his decision to restructure the syndicate's operations toward legitimate enterprise. About the cherry blossoms. About a documentary she had watched. About a poem he had read at 3 a.m. when sleep refused to come. They met again the following week. And the week after that. They walked along the Cheonggyecheon stream at dusk. They ate tteokbokki from a street vendor in Gwangjang Market, something they had done on their 3rd date 6 years ago, when she had burned her tongue, and he had offered her his water bottle with a formality so absurd that she had laughed until her eyes watered. They rebuilt, slowly, carefully, with the reverence of people who understood that what they were constructing was fragile and precious, and worth every moment of patience it required. He did not rush her. She did not pretend the wounds were healed. They existed in the tender, honest space between damage and repair, a space where love could grow if it was given enough light and truth and time. 3 months later, June, the Kong estate, Payu. The rice terraces were flooded with shallow water, turning the hillside into a mirror reflecting clouds and sky. The persimmon tree was heavy with green fruit. The bonsai juniper that Lady Kong had been pruning in February was now flush with new growth. The ceremony was small. 30 guests. Family. Close friends. The monks from Jogisa Temple. Dr. Kwame Asante, who served as Amara's escort and wept openly throughout the vows. Aunt Minseo, who had insisted on making all the tiak personally and had commandeered the estate kitchen for 2 days. Amara wore a white hanbok with golden adinkra embroidery along the sleeves and hem, each symbol chosen for its meaning. Sankofa at the cuffs. Gai Nyam along the collar. Odo Nyu Phai Kwan. Love never loses its way home, embroidered in a delicate line down her back. Taehyun wore a traditional Korean groom's attire, modified to include a strip of Kent cloth woven into the sash, a gift from Amara's mother in Accra, who attended via video link. crying and laughing simultaneously, while her husband tried to figure out the camera angle. Lady Kong sat in the front row. She wore her finest hanbok, midnight blue with silver embroidery. Her silver hair was immaculate. Her posture was regal. Her hands were folded in her lap, with the stillness of a woman who had carried an impossible weight for 5 years and had finally set it down. When Taehyun and Amara exchanged vows, spoken in both Korean and Chui, witnessed by 2 cultures and 1 family that had learned, through devastation and grace, what it truly meant to love, Lady Kong closed her eyes and smiled. The reception was held in the garden. Paper lanterns hung from the persimmon tree. A small ensemble played music that shifted between Korean folk melodies and Ghanaian highlife rhythms, creating something new and beautiful and entirely their own. Taehyun stood at the edge of the garden, watching Amara dance with Kwame, a traditional Ghanaian step that she was trying to teach Aunt Minseo, who was executing it with fierce determination and approximately 30% accuracy. Junho appeared beside him, with 2 glasses of soju. "You look happy," Junho said. "It's unsettling." Taehyun accepted the glass. "Get used to it. The Busan operations are finalized. Legitimate restructuring complete. The last of the Jong channels has been closed." "Good. And your mother asked me to give you this." Junho handed him a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note in Lady Kang's precise calligraphy. "I broke you apart to keep you alive. Now you have put yourselves back together in a way I never could have designed. You are stronger at the broken places. Both of you. That is not my doing. It is yours. I am proud. I am sorry. I am grateful. Your mother, *. Taehyun folded the note carefully and placed it inside his jacket, against his chest, against the tattoo. Amara appeared at his side, slightly breathless from dancing, her eyes bright with the particular joy that comes from being surrounded by people who see you, truly see you, and love what they see. "Your aunt is going to master that dance step if it kills her," she said. "It might." She laughed. That laugh. The one that had started everything. The one that had survived everything. He took her hand. His thumb traced the inside of her wrist. A gesture so small, so private, that no one else in the garden would have noticed. But she felt it. A current. A promise. A continuation of a conversation that had started 6 years ago in a cramped cafe in Hongdae and had survived divorce, exile, conspiracy, heartbreak, and the slow, miraculous work of 2 people choosing to heal. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For not giving up. On yourself. On what you built. On," he hesitated, "on the possibility that I could become someone worth returning to." She looked at him. The sharp jawline, the piercing eyes, the stillness that she had once found intimidating and now recognized as the quiet center of a man who had finally stopped hiding from his own heart. "You didn't become someone worth returning to," she said softly. "You uncovered the person who was always there, underneath the armor, underneath the name." She touched the edge of his collar, where the Sankofa tattoo curved toward his neck. "You went back," she said, "and you got it." He pulled her close. Not dramatically. Not for the audience of wedding guests. For her. Only for her. His arms around her shoulders. Her head against his chest. 2 people standing in a garden in Payu, while the sun set over flooded rice terraces and the sky turned to gold. That night, long after the guests had gone and the lanterns had been taken down, Amara and Taehyun sat together on the veranda of the old villa. The rice fields reflected starlight. The air smelled of earth and jasmine and the lingering sweetness of celebration. They did not speak. They did not need to. Some silences are empty. Others are the fullest language 2 people can share. A conversation conducted entirely in presence, in warmth, in the steady rhythm of breathing side by side. Amara leaned her head against his shoulder. He rested his chin against her locks. The Sankofa chain at her neck caught the moonlight. Inside the house, Lady Kong slept peacefully for the first time in 5 years. And somewhere in the distance, carried on the June wind, moving across the water-mirrored fields, there was a sound. Not quite music, not quite silence. Something in between. Something like the sound of a family beginning again. Please like, share, and subscribe.